Hello and welcome, everybody. I am Gustavo Tolosa, your host for this online music club, and on another wonderful Saturday. And I am very happy to be here with you all again. And this is a book club that I started in June, I think, or maybe even earlier, maybe May of 2020. And we have continued up to today. If you're watching this on YouTube and would like to sign up for this free book club so that you get the notices and the replays, you can do that by sending me an email at info@plantemas.com. So thank you again, everyone, for joining in. And we are reading Own Your Health by Glen Merzer. And we are currently reading Own Your Health by Glen Merzer, who is here, as you can see, the author on the screen with his lovely wife, Joanna. And so today we have a very special session because we're reading chapter 5, or I should say we're discussing chapter 5 because probably all of you have already read it. And the title is The Curious Case of Joanna. So Joanna, you're very curious, and we are very curious to learn to get to know you. This is the first time to meet you, so nice to meet you. And I want to welcome now both of you officially to the book club. Welcome, Glen and Joanna. How are you?
Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. We are okay, and we are very happy to be there. Thank you, Gustavo, for having us.
Could you move closer to the camera for the sound?
Yes.
Sure.
And see if I can do this. There.
Oh.
Now, yeah. Okay. That's how it's supposed to work. So, very good. What else can I ask? To have the author and also to have the guest who is featured in this chapter, to have you both in our book club here. So let me first start by asking you a question that I've had in my mind as I was reading this chapter. Probably, I want to ask Glen if it was frustrating or how frustrating it was at the beginning when Joanna was not vegan or vegetarian, and how you could live your plant-based life with someone who didn't. And if Joanna, how was it for you to be living with someone who didn't eat the way that you were? How did you all manage that? Because I know marriages and couples who have a very hard, very difficult time when one is following this way of eating and the other one isn't. So just take your turns and talk a little bit about that.
All right, who goes first? I'll go first. Well, when I met Joanna, she was living in Canada and I was living in Santa Monica. So it was a long distance relationship. And she at the time ate some animal foods. And we would talk a lot over the phone. And she seemed interested in the fact that I was vegan. And she seemed open to at least going vegetarian. And she had a long history with herbs. When she was living in Poland, she learned a lot about herbs, and herbs improved her health. So herbs are plant food, so it made her feel good about plants, I think. I think she was open to the idea that there's magic in plants. And so as we talked more and more, she said, yes, I'll try to go vegetarian soon. And then when I visited her in Canada, I found this thing, I think it was called a turkey.
It was ground turkey.
Ground turkey in her freezer. I'd never even seen this thing before. I said, what the hell is this? And she told me, and I said, I thought you were going vegetarian. And she said, well, I will soon. I'll throw it out after your visit. And I said, well, that's silly. I'll just throw it out now. And I threw it out. I can still hear the sound it made as it hit the garbage can. This loud thud. And Joanna didn't say much about that. But after we were married for what, about a year or so, she told me how annoyed she had been when I threw out her ground turkey meat. But she did go vegetarian, probably starting a little before we got married.
Yes, about a year before we got married, I started switching to the vegetarian diet, and in the first year when we were married, I still would have sometimes the cheese or eggs, but within that year, the first year of the marriage, I made the transition to the vegan diet, and it wasn't difficult for Glen at the time when I was getting more and more sick. It wasn't difficult for Glen to eat the way I was preparing our meals, because he was happier when I cooked meals that were healthier. The healthier meals, Glen was more eager to eat, and he was happier, and he didn't have a problem when I had to make a lot of restrictions within what I would cook.
Overall, it wasn't too difficult to transition, I think, for Joanna. And I was pleased that she made the transition. And everything was good for some years until she started to develop health problems.
I just needed somebody to show me how to approach the vegan diet, because when I was a teenager, I already had back in my mind this idea about going vegetarian. But in those days, nobody back in my country, nobody talked about being vegetarian. There were no examples. And then later in my life, when I met Glen, the doorway to the vegetarian/vegan diet was open for me.
And naturally, I felt like I was the tour guide to the vegan diet, and I was trying to show her things. But the truth is, I wasn't on that healthy a vegan diet myself, because I was eating, the vegan hot dogs and a lot of processed vegan foods. I wasn't eating a lot of donuts, but I was eating vegan ice creams and vegan hot dogs and some fried foods. So sometimes French fries. So I wasn't on the optimal diet myself.
I liked very much an ethnic cuisine. So anything that was from the Indian kitchen, Thai kitchen, I loved very much. At some point, I had an opportunity to learn the macrobiotic cooking, and I started creating my versions of the macrobiotic meals that weren't typical bland, macrobiotic meals as people can imagine. I would try to make them as flavorful as possible, and sometimes I served to our guests, and everybody was very surprised that the macrobiotic dishes could taste really good. And I was always open to, all kinds of versions of the vegan meals created based on the recipes from around the world. And so I think our way of eating wasn't boring. We had the variety in our kitchen. And I should have mentioned, earlier in our marriage, I experimented with the vegan raw food diet too. And that was fun, especially, when you have the hot summer, raw food can be very refreshing and cooling. So
Yes, yes. Well, I would like to underline the fact that what you mentioned. I always like to say this, that you can really be a vegan and really eat unhealthy. You could be eating French fries and donuts and Coke all day, and nowadays we have other terms that are more appropriate for what we are, preaching, which is whole food, something that is whole, an apple, a potato, and plant-based. And that I do hear people talk about badly about vegan foods, and I think that's part of it. Like you said, you can find a ethnic cuisine, whether it's Indian or Mexican or Japanese or whatever it is, and use herbs and spices to make it delicious, and be eating a whole food plant-based diet. So just so I'm putting this out there, because these videos are sometimes seen by new people, and it's good to make the difference.
Yes,
So
and then you can have a variety of all kinds of smoothies. You can make the smoothies throughout the day. And
right.
I used to make the so-called raw soups that I would blend in the blender. I would have at that time, there would be, for example, almonds soaked overnight, and then the skin removed from the almonds, rinsed very well. So the almonds would go to the blender, and let's say a tiny bit of the sunflower seeds and or pumpkin seeds. There would be some fresh onion chopped in it, fresh carrots, fresh basil, let's say a little bit of the fresh cilantro, an avocado in those days, yes. The avocado would be added to it, a piece of apple, some type of leafy greens. Everything would be mixed in the blender with the herbs and seasonings, and that would be a raw soup served in the summer. Very filling, very nutritious.
Sounds wonderful. And I want to, before we jump into a little more of the health, I want to ask you, so Glen, you wrote this chapter number 5, and without Joanna knowing, and then you told her, or how was it?
I think I broke it to her when I was halfway through or so.
Okay, all right.
First I wanted to see if I could do it. If I could tell the story, because it was a very difficult time. Here I had brought Joanna into the vegan community and vegan living, and taught her this healthy diet, and then her health broke down. And if there are some non-vegans out there right now, they might say, aha, there's something wrong with the vegan diet. No, there's nothing wrong with being vegan. There was something wrong with the way we were doing it. And it particularly affected Joanna because she had some underlying conditions that she didn't even know about. So she's still a vegan today, and she's healthy. So we got her health back while remaining vegan, but we learned to do it better, and specifically, Joanna learned certain rules that she had to adhere to.
Right. You had to do some research and not give up and say, oh, well, this plant-based or vegan diet is not working well. Let's throw it away. And you had to really be determined, which you were, and find, because you knew that a whole food plant-based diet works, but you had to figure out what was wrong. And I don't think, or what was causing her this pain. And I don't think that you got any really helpful answers from medical doctors, or did you?
No, you see, it was very disappointing because I went to so many doctors, and every time I would hear an answer, I don't know. And you still had to pay a lot of money for the visits. And these were the doctors, a lot of them who were not covered by the health insurance. And there were medical doctors who also were licensed in the integrative medicine. And I just had to come up with my own approaches. I did a lot of research. I read through a lot of books and articles, scientific articles, all kinds of reports. I had a few boxes of all those reports that I printed out, and I would analyze them. And I knew that I had to find a way to help myself because nobody else would. And it was very hard. And especially, I realized a long time ago that even when you are you think you are on a healthy vegan diet, but if you eat the wrong foods, you are going to harm yourself. And, sugar comes in so many forms, but we know that sugar stimulates the inflammation in the body. Not only sugar, but also things like gluten. My rheumatologist told me when I went to my rheumatologist first time, and he learned that I was already on the gluten-free diet, he said, very good, because I recommend to all my patients who have all kinds of autoimmune diseases to go gluten-free immediately, because gluten will also trigger the inflammatory responses in the body. So, sugar, I'm not just talking about, the white sugar, but if you will eat a lot of dried fruits, that will give you also a different form of sugar that you will be getting too much in your body, and it will stimulate the inflammatory responses. So I really had to figure out also certain type of flour products would have the same kind of effect on the body like sugar. And so in the first place, I discovered that going macrobiotic, vegan, gluten-free macrobiotic was the best approach to start healing, because I was told by my rheumatologist and by his boss that lupus damaged my entire digestive system. So at the worst point, I was so sick that even if I took a bite of food or a sip of water, I would be in a horrible pain if I didn't take digestive enzymes with it. And it wasn't just the abdominal pain, but also the pains in the joints and the pains in the muscles throughout the whole body. So and the pains that I endured would last non-stop, day and night, for weeks and sometimes for months. So I had many nights that I couldn't sleep because I was in so much pain and nothing worked. So by making certain choices, I had to learn what worked for me, what not. Go ahead.
Gustavo, could I try to explain give my explanation of how this all happened?
Yes, please. I was going to ask. I was going to say first, if you now could tell a little bit about how you were diagnosed back in your country, and then the lupus, and so that people have a background of where the pain came from and everything. But go ahead, Glenn, add any details.
Okay.
Well, Joanna, first she could tell about what she was diagnosed with in Poland, because I can't pronounce it.
Yes, so when I was 16 years old, I had this kidney disease that it was diagnosed at the time when it was already in the chronic stage. And my main symptoms at the time were that I was so fatigued, I would come back from school and I would collapse on the bed and sleep. And my mother had even a problem to wake me up for dinner. I was so exhausted. and my urine was getting dark, like a black tea. When you make the strong black tea, that was that kind of color, and I had the high amount of proteins in my urine. And I was in a hospital, and I had the biopsy done to my kidney. Doctors at the time told my parents that they have to do the biopsy in order to confirm that it's not cancer, and so that they would know what kind of approach to take, what kind of medications I should be getting. So I had the biopsy to my kidney, and the biopsy nearly killed me. I got the infection from that biopsy, and for about a week, doctors would give me injections in the hospital of the strongest antibiotic that at that time was possible, just to drop the fever, because I had the fever, full thermometer of the fever, for about a week. And I survived that. The biopsy results were, I will give you the Latin name, 2 long words: glomerulonephritis mesangial proliferativa. Now, in English, I think it's a few words in reverse. Mesangial. You can look in the book. Oh, please open there. I think it's mesangial proliferativa.
Mesangial proliferativa.
It is basically that kidney nephritis, lupus nephritis, known in English. And so I was put then on a certain type of the antibiotic that I would get in injections for 2 years, every 10 days. And that antibiotic actually was responsible for 2 years later I got an allergic reaction during the injection, and I was told I can't get that kind of antibiotic anymore. And the doctors told me at that time, after I left the hospital when I was 16, when I already had the diagnosis of my disease, they told me that there is no cure for me in the world. I have to live with this disease like people with stomach ulcers or a heart disease, that I have to accept it. But I didn't want to accept it. And then, since there was nothing for me, I was deteriorating. I was year after year getting worse and worse. And then when I already studied at the university back in my country, I was getting so sick to the point that doctors were saying that in the future I would need the dialysis and the kidney transplant. And I said to my mother that I am not going to be ready for something like this. So I left Poland looking for a cure in the world. And I remember one day I walked into the first health food store in my life in Athens, in Greece. And my eyes went immediately to the shelf with supplements. And there was this Ayurvedic supplement from India that I got a very strong feeling that this may work. Now, at that time, I was so desperate for a cure that I just wanted to find something that would work for me. And I asked the manager, an owner of that health food store, about that supplement. And he explained to me that this is the type of a supplement, Ayurvedic supplement, that is used by medical doctors in India since the late 1930s to treat patients with kidney stones and to flush out the sand from the kidneys. And the owner of the health food store explained to me that if a person would take that supplement for 3 weeks non-stop, then the sand would be flushed out of the kidneys. And if the person continued taking that supplement for 6 months, then the kidney stones would be crushed into smaller pieces and then gradually would be flushed out too as tiny pieces. I didn't have kidney stones. I didn't have the sand in the kidneys. My problem was different. But I had a very strong feeling for that supplement, and I went with my instinct. My feeling was telling me that I should take this supplement nonstop for 2 years in the high doses, and that after 2 years I will be healthy. And I believed it. I trusted it, and I bought those supplements, and I was taking them regularly, and I bought enough. I calculated how many more bottles I will need to complete 2 years of such treatment. And after 2 years, my disease disappeared. One of the doctors told me that it must have been a spontaneous remission. Since then, there was no trace in my body, in my kidneys, of that disease. And since then, I recommended that supplement to some people whom I met who told me that they had kidney stones. And so they bought it and they used it and they were very happy. They said it worked for them. We were already married. I was living in the States when I decided to do the research on that supplement. Because the name of the company that makes that supplement is Himalaya. And in the world, this supplement is known under the word System. But in the United States, it's under the name Uricare. And as I did the research about 15 years ago, I was just curious. I went on the internet and I tried to find this supplement. I was thinking maybe I should try to locate it in case in the future I would need to repeat the treatment where I can get it. And I learned that now, at that time when I did the research, that there was the headquarters of this company in Houston, Texas, and that this company made many different supplements for all kinds of problems, and that the supplement that I took was, at the time when I was looking for it, was under the clinical trials at the Mayo Institute here in the United States. And then a few years later, I noticed that this supplement started popping up on the shelves of the health food stores like Whole Foods. So I was able to buy it at Whole Foods if I decided at some point to give myself a boost. When I took that supplement for 2 years, I wasn't a vegan yet. I wasn't a vegetarian either. So I just wanted to explain to everybody. But it is very important, when you are on a vegan diet, you are not consuming heavy proteins from animal products. And those proteins from animal products are very damaging, not only to the kidneys, but also to the liver. And when I was sick as a teenager with my kidneys, at that time, the doctors had the wrong approach, because they would see that there was the high amount of proteins in the urine, and they would say, oh, you are losing too much protein from your body. That's not good. So you have to replenish the loss of the protein. So you have to keep eating more meat. So I had to eat more meat. And as a result, my urine tests were getting even worse. I was getting higher and higher proteinuria.
Apparently, none of the doctors in Poland had read any of my books. So that was really the problem. Gustavo, how about if I give you my explanation of what happened here?
Yeah, that would be great.
We were enlightened by a rheumatologist in Los Angeles who told us that the glomerulonephritis. Yeah, that one. Oh, what happened? Did we disappear? Oh.
We're back.
he told us that that kidney disease was in fact a symptom of lupus, which means that Joanna may well have had lupus since she was a child.
That's what he said. Yes.
But other than that kidney disease, she didn't suffer too many other symptoms of lupus.
Yes.
So she didn't grow up knowing or believing that she had lupus.
But let me interrupt you. When I showed to medical doctors here in the States the translation of my hospitalization card from the time when I was 16, with the results written in that card, results of the biopsy to the kidney, every doctor who looked at this, they immediately said, that was lupus that you had. And the biopsy results are showing that that was lupus.
So apparently she had lupus virtually all her life. And like most people with autoimmune diseases, she was gluten sensitive. But she didn't know she was gluten sensitive because I guess she wasn't eating that much gluten until she married me. And I introduced her to seitan, which for those who don't know is a wheat meat that's really pure gluten, pure wheat gluten. Because she wasn't having meat and other products that she used to have, she was probably having more bread. So on the vegan diet, which I felt was a healthy diet that I was introducing her to, she was eating more of what she particularly couldn't eat. I mean, I don't eat seitan now, but I could probably eat it without a problem. And I eat bread without a problem. But I don't have the gluten sensitivity that Joanna had. So I had introduced her to a diet that was rough on her because she was overdoing it with the gluten products. And that was what started to bring on the symptoms. And one of the first things we did when she got the symptoms was we decided she should lay off the gluten. And she started to feel somewhat better. It was maybe 25% better, wasn't enough, but she was feeling better, somewhat better. And we went to the first rheumatologist for just one appointment, and we never saw her again. But she said that Joanna should get a test for celiac. And we were open to it. We had been thinking of, wondering if she should be tested for it. But the point was she was already off bread and gluten anyway. So the doctor said, unfortunately, in order to take the test, what Joanna has to do is eat gluten 10 times a day, all day long, so that the test will be effective.
Wait, she said I have to load my diet with a lot of gluten products for at least 6 weeks before I could be tested for celiac. Now, a few months before I saw that doctor, a few months before that, I wasn't gluten-free yet. And I went from a doctor to a doctor asking them to please test me for the celiac disease. And the doctors were very negative about it. They said, well, if you have a problem with gluten, you know that you have problem, just stop eating gluten.
Right.
And I would say, yeah, but it doesn't make sense because if it turns out that I am celiac, then just dropping simply gluten from the diet is not going to be the only solution. And I said, could I have, for example, the simple test like it's done in Europe based on saliva, the DNA test? And the doctors they didn't want to do it. And then one of those doctors said, just go on the gluten-free diet, that's it. And that was the same doctor who sent me to that rheumatologist, the first one. So he told me to go on the gluten-free diet and schedule the appointment with that rheumatologist. So I scheduled the earliest appointment with that rheumatologist I could get, which was in 3 months. And during that time, waiting to see her, I already went gluten-free because I followed the advice of that doctor.
Right. So
And then it was too late for me to do this test for the celiac disease.
I agree with all the doctors who just said, just go off gluten. I don't know much about that DNA test, so maybe if she could have done a DNA test, that would have been fine. But to do what this rheumatologist was suggesting was patently insane. Joanna knew that she felt better when she didn't eat gluten. And we told that to the doctor, and she said, well, I'm sorry, but you have to eat gluten all day long for 6 weeks for the test to be accurate.
So I listened to that first rheumatologist, and I said, okay, I will try. And for the first 2 days, I ate gluten foods, and I became so sick that I couldn't do it anymore. And I called her and I said, I'm sorry, I can't do this.
So that, it all led to the conclusion that if you simply trust in doctors, I mean, imagine if Joanna had listened to this nutty rheumatologist and stuffed herself with gluten for 6 weeks. It would have all but killed her, So you have to listen to yourself. If it's causing pain and discomfort to eat gluten, don't eat gluten. Trust your body. And to find out if you have celiac disease, all right, you find out you have it. What's the solution? Don't eat gluten. Well, she wasn't eating gluten anyway.
But then I started gradually getting more and more health problems. My whole system was falling apart. And I started having typical symptoms that lupus people have. When you would go to a doctor and they would have a chart for you to fill up with all your symptoms, and every symptom that's for celiac, I had all those symptoms. And I was reacting to the sun. I couldn't be in the sun. The last few years when we were in California, I just couldn't go outside during the day. The sun would trigger all kinds of symptoms for me. I was very sick. It wasn't, at that point, it wasn't just the food, but it was also the sun exposure that I couldn't handle. And
so have you met, during these years, have you met other people that have lupus? And have you had any experiences where you've met somebody and you have told them about your experience and they tried it? Do you think that whole food, a plant-based diet really would help other people that have lupus, in your opinion, knowing that, we're none of us here are medical doctors, but for what we experience or you experience in our body, what do you think?
You know what I learned? First of all, no, I didn't meet people with lupus, but I met people with who suffered from different types of autoimmune problems. And what I learned from my research is that when people have the autoimmune problems, very often their autoimmune problems start from the damages in the digestive tract. So it is very important to heal the digestive tract, the lining of the digestive tract, because it is often so-called leaky gut that triggers the autoimmune responses, and the wrong food choices, food allergies, and also gluten will start damaging the lining, intestinal lining, causing that leaky gut. So it is important to work on healing the digestive system, and one of my approaches were fermented foods and the right type of probiotics that heal the body, because if you don't have the proper balance in your gastrointestinal microbiome, and if the bad bacteria starts taking over and your good bacteria is then outnumbered by the bad bacteria, it can't work properly, and you have the microbiome that's out of balance, and you start getting more and more sick. So it's very important to focus on the fermented foods, drinking. I started drinking kefir that's made from the coconut water.
So is there anything else that any of you, Glenn or Joanna, want to say to people that may have autoimmune diseases or even lupus? Any messages of hope?
Yes, never give up. And when a doctor tells you, like what a doctor told me back in 2012, that I had 5 years to live, I decided that I have to, fight. I just have to do everything I can to keep going. So if the doctor gives you bad news, you are in charge of your health, of your body, and you can turn everything around.
I'd like to point out there's a good doctor named Dr. Brooke Goldner, who has written a couple books on autoimmune diseases.
And she's a lupus doctor. She had lupus.
She had lupus. She overcame lupus. And we had a telehealth conference with her. And she gave us what may be for many people with lupus good advice, but she told Joanna to try a lot of it was raw kale, right? In
she asked me to make smoothies, green smoothies, and very highly concentrated. And I was allergic at that time. I was allergic to raw kale. Her approach was the really raw food diet. And because my digestive system was very badly damaged, the raw food diet is the mistake. So what, in case of the badly damaged digestive system, the most healing approach was the macrobiotic,
right?
But not the raw. I was getting more sick, even though I knew that Dr. Brooke Goldner healed herself from lupus with her approach, which was, the raw food approach.
So the message is not that she was wrong, but that everybody needs to find their own solutions.
What works for one person is not going to necessarily work for another person. You have to tailor the approach to your needs, to what your body needs. You can't, think that what worked for somebody else that probably will work for you. You have to be, the best teacher for yourself and your own doctor.
And when you keep in mind that autoimmune diseases are diseases of inflammation, animal foods are never going to be the answer, because all animal foods are inflammatory for the simple reason that the human body was not designed to process animal foods. The answer is going to be within the world of plant foods, but for some people it may be raw plant foods, and for another person maybe it has to be lightly steamed or cooked in some other way.
I can eat now some raw foods. At the time, I couldn't even have a piece of raw apple. I had to steam my apples. Now I can eat a lot of raw foods, and I can eat big leafy green salads. I am okay. But it took for me at least 2 years to rebuild my digestive system, and I had to start with it as if it was as I was dealing with a baby, with the kind of the baby foods. So that's what I wanted to say.
I have a question here from Dina that says, how much fruit do you eat, Joanna, and which fruits can you not eat, if any?
At this point, I can eat every fruit, but I learned to eat more vegetables and less fruits. I had this wonderful Japanese acupuncturist who kept telling me that her mother back from Japan would call her and tell her, remember, don't overdo with the fruits because it is still sugar. Eat more vegetables and a small amount of fruits. One more thing. oils, vegetable oils. People may think, well, it can be, it's from vegetables, not from the animals, but still, vegetable oils are going to add more omega-6. Omega-6 can trigger the inflammation in the body. So the best thing is the flax seeds. Use the flax seeds and flax meal. I used to make the special steeped drink from the flax seeds because it has a very healing effect on the lining of the digestive system. And that is from the, European folk cuisine that was used for centuries. And
right.
It works.
And you have, Glen, you were sending people that bought the book some of Joanna's recipes, right?
Yes.
Those are...
So if you buy the book in any form, paperback, Kindle, or audiobook, just send me an email. I'll type it here in the chat room. Where's the typing? It's G Merzer.
I will type it, Glen. Here, I'm going to put it gmerzer@aol.com.
And just write Gustavo in the subject line, and I'll send you 3 bonuses: a PDF file of some of Joanna's recipes, Chef AJ's carrot cake recipe, and a video of Chef AJ making the carrot cake. So 3 free bonuses just for the purchase of the book.
Okay. Well, this has been very, very helpful. I know people here are very interested in all of this. We will have you again as a guest, so this is not the last time. But one more question I want to ask Joanna. One more question. For leaking gut, okay, do you think in your own experience that, or for Glen, whoever can answer this, leaking gut, can it be restored with just plant food, change into a whole food plant-based, or do you think that the person would need to take supplements?
Some supplements also will be needed, and next time when we come back, I will prepare the names, so I will have it, and if you, Gustavo, can in advance even give us some questions that people will write to you, I will prepare the answers. And just remember, if you have the leaky gut, if you eat the raw foods, and you would eat a lot of raw foods that are very rough, imagine like if you would be taking a bristle brush, scrubbing over your digestive lining. What would that brush do to it? It would cause more damage. That's what will happen with very hard particles of the raw foods. So at the healing time, you would need to be very careful. The only raw foods at that time I would allow myself were smoothies. Yeah.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you. Were you going to say something, Glen?
I was just going to say that bonus offer that I just made, if somebody is watching this video 2 years from now, it's still good.
Okay. Okay, good.
It's a forever offer.
All right. Well, I will include it in the description here underneath later on. Well, we will need to close, but thank you again. I know that you're busy.
Thank you very much.
And next week, for everybody, we are reading and discussing chapter 6 and hopefully 7. That's a longer chapter than the others, but very interesting. And I will see everyone next Saturday. And thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.